This video is brought to you by FlexiSpot. Hollywood, that palm tree-lined haven where starry-eyed dreamers flock in hopes of making it big. But ever since the Writers Guild of America, the WGA, went on strike May 2nd, we're more aware than ever of the industry's less glamorous side. Horror stories have emerged from both newbie and well-established screenwriters, many of whom are finding it impossible to eke out a living in the streaming age. If you want to hear from one of these people, I did an interview with screenwriter Colby Day on Wisecrack Live a couple weeks ago. We'll put the link in the description. You can hear him talk about it from a writer's perspective. Alex O'Keefe, Emmy-winning writer for The Bear, recently told the BBC he has $6 in his bank account. Other writers have spoken out about living on food stamps or supplementing their income with retail or food service work. The emerging narrative makes it clear that writing for the screen is often no longer a solid career path. At the same time, some people outside the industry are less than inspired by, say, ABC's strike-proof fall TV lineup, or the fact that production shut down on everything from Stranger Things to Yellow Jackets. A population accustomed to instant gratification via endless binge watching is now faced with the looming threat of no new content besides Steve Harvey's dubious legal circus. To some, this makes Hollywood writers seem ungrateful, over-demanding, and even greedy. When we think of folks like Mike Schur, or Sam Levinson, or Shonda Rhimes, we imagine people with fun and cushy jobs, and even cushier bank accounts. It's hard to feel too much solidarity with these folks when many of us have full-time jobs and struggle to pay rent. But does that perspective miss the point? And not just because it's misleading to fixate on, say, the top 20 most successful players in a union of over 11,000. What's more, could the backlash to the strike reveal something about how labor movements function in America? Well, let's find out in this Wisecrack edition on the WGA strike. Why should we care? Hey guys, before we get into it, do you notice anything different? Anything? It might be that I'm at a beautiful new desk. Now, we've used the same desk for a very long time. I was getting kind of sick of it. So I was very excited when FlexiSpot reached out and asked if we wanted to pick out a brand new desk. Now, the cool thing about FlexiSpot is the desks don't just look good, they are fully adjustable and customizable. What does that mean? Well, it means I got to go online and pick out what size I wanted, what color I wanted for the top. I picked a lovely matte black finish because I'm dark like that. Okay, so this desk already looks great, but there's a control panel on the side that allows me to do this. It's super smooth as it's going up, and then all of a sudden, I'm now at my new standing desk, which is super great if you're worried about your back, want to get some exercise during the day, or just kind of move around as you're working. Now, while I love that I can adjust this desk to be just in the right spot, I also love how it looks, and one of the reasons it looks good is because it has this environmentally friendly wood top, which is super durable and just looks very cool. Listen, I know a lot of us work from home now, and it can be really monotonous and bad for you to sit at the same desk all day, but with a desk like this from FlexiSpot, you can start sitting down, then stand up for a little bit, sit down again, sit on an exercise ball. You have a lot of options, and it kind of just makes things more fun. So if you too are looking for a new desk, have always wanted to try out a standing desk and think something adjustable like this would suit your needs, we have a link in the description and you can check out FlexiSpot's full line right there. I really can't recommend it enough. I genuinely like this desk a lot. So if you're in the market, click the link in the description, check out FlexiSpot, and send us a picture of your desk once you get it. For now, let's get back to the show. Okay, so negotiations between the WGA and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, the AMPTP, broke down when the AMPTP refused to agree to new WGA demands, such as higher wages and minimum amounts of writers per TV show. An overwhelming majority of members voted in favor of a strike, and as of May 2nd, all work towards writing the shows and movies that give us joy in a broken world has ceased. The WGA has said that the studio's responses to our proposals have been wholly insufficient given the existential crisis writers are facing. Which might sound odd because aren't we supposedly in the era of peak TV? And there's more content being made than ever before, so why all the complaining? Well, for one, the WGA noted that 98% of staff writers, which is the entry level, are making minimum pay. The same goes for 95% of writers the next level up, called story editors. Among the next two highest rungs, nearly 60% are making union minimums. Basically, what used to be a baseline for compensation has now become the norm. At the same time, writers are feeling the squeeze in a variety of ways. They're being hired for fewer weeks to do the same amount of work, laboring in mini rooms with smaller staffs and seeing minuscule residuals for shows on streaming platforms. Now, residuals are payments made to writers when their shows are re-aired, a right first one after WGA Strike in 1960. And they were once essential to making writing for TV a sustainable career. They're also why anyone who wrote on a show like Friends or Seinfeld could warm themselves in the winter by just burning piles of money while your frozen bones watch outside their window shivering. Now, mini rooms also mean fewer jobs overall. For many new writers trying to land a first or second job, writing for TV is becoming like gig work, where paying your dues means living on unemployment. The WGA has been pushing for things like pay increases to account for inflation and rising cost of living.
Structural change needs to happen in the way that we're employed and paid.
To work in TV, you basically have to live in one of the two most expensive cities in the world. They also want better health and pension plans, minimum writer requirements for shows, and other rectifications. Which, given the fact that they power a $226 billion and ever-growing industry, seems, not unreasonable. And importantly, a major issue during the strike is whether studios can use AI to generate scripts.
This clause in what they're asking for doesn't actually cost executives anything now. They just want a guarantee that studios won't hire AI instead of writers.
Now, the WGA proposed that studios not produce movies or TV written by AI. They also want to demand that studios not use AI to generate source material, i.e., content the WGA members are then hired to edit, and then they thus get paid a lot less than if they were working from scratch.
They don't want AI to be used to write or rewrite any scripts. They don't want to have to rewrite what some of them call trash generated by AI. Yeah. And they don't want studios to be able to train AI on their work.
And just imagine that you go to like film school, you work to become a really good screenwriter, and then some asshole is like, here's a script that a computer wrote. Can you clean it up a bit? That's not fun. Now, the AMPTP were like, no to that request, but they did helpfully counteroffer that they would hold annual meetings to discuss advancements in technology. You know, that would be like if your local Chick-fil-A was putting razor blades in the sandwiches and you said, hey, local Chick-fil-A, along with like not funding hate groups, can you also stop putting razor blades in the sandwiches? And then they said, yes, we'll have an annual meeting to discuss not putting razor blades in your beloved Chick-fil-A spicy chicken sandwich with extra pickles. So now, WGA writers are once again joining the ranks of millions of Americans who have gone on strike to protest labor conditions. Now, we're not going to get too exhaustive because time is a finite resource, but here's some context. Now, striking in America, the way scholar Eric Loomis tells it, started when the industrialization of early 19th century New England textile mills displaced independent craftsmen. This led to a young, and we mean young like literal kids, urbanized workforce laboring long hours with low wages and conditions for companies making lots of money. Now, in the face of dehumanizing factory work, labor organizations sprung up and strikes took off in the 1830s. One early influential strike was instigated by the Lowell Mill Girls, young women who worked and lived in a supervised, company-owned factory town, typically short-term, before becoming wives and mothers, laboring for 12 or 14-hour days, 6 days a week in hot, humid, loud factories. They protested against these conditions and repeatedly went on strike after pay cuts and rent increases. They'd turn off the machines and walk out, shutting down production, which sort of feels like the ultimate 19th century mic drop. I don't think they had mics in the 19th century, though. If you want to in the comments, let us know when microphones were invented and who invented them. Whoever gets that first can be proud of themselves. As with AI today, technological changes were essential to their complaints. More efficient machines meant workers' loom speeds increased 70% over a 2-year period, while their wages only increased 16%. The mill girls won some victories, but factories mostly responded by replacing them with immigrant labor, showing the limitations of a single group's solidarity. Going forward, recurring waves of strikes were part of an uphill battle essential to winning many labor conditions some of us still enjoy, like the 8-hour workday. In the face of military and corporate-sponsored violence, as well as employer-organized sabotage, workers agitated again and again against deadly work conditions, comically low wages, the de-skilling of labor, and so on. Sit-down strikes took off in the 1930s when Flint auto workers illegally occupied their factory, and in 1937 alone, 5 million workers walked off the job. But there were limits to what organized labor could do, in large part because unions in America were historically fragmented around separate industries, regions, and demographic groups, with many unions choosing racism over solidarity. For example, black Pullman railroad workers weren't allowed to join the American Railway Union. So after the infamous Pullman strike of 1894, the charming Mr. Pullman started only hiring non-union black porters. The 1935 National Labor Relations Act didn't help when it centered labor organizing around individual plants, stores, or factories instead of companies or industries. Now, this is why today, every single Starbucks store has to start its own tiny union. Again, we're not saying it's tiny because it's not mighty, just that there's a lot of Starbucks and you all got to start your own unions, and that's really tough. I wonder if they're all in one big group chat. If you are, let us know in the chat. The comments. This isn't live. There's no chat, just comments. But it didn't have to look this way. Throughout America's labor history, key groups agitated for one big union, which is exactly what it sounds like. One entire working class union harnessing all the collective power of laborers in every industry. This movement really began with the Knights of Labor, which started as a secret society in 1869 based around the conceit that an injury to one is the concern of all. In accordance, they let most workers, except women and Chinese immigrants, join, though they also consigned black workers to segregated assemblies. So, it's like not the best. In case I said that, sometimes I worry that I'm like smiling when I read a line that's kind of dark and you're all thinking like, does that make him happy? No, I think segregation, bad, objectively bad. I don't mean to smile when I say it, it's just bad. The Knights wanted to return to a pre-industrial America, arguing that corporate growth threw the power balance between worker and employer out of whack. According to Loomis, the organization believed that through reform, it could recreate the democratic smallholder republic of pre-Civil War America. But the very thing that gave the Knights of Labor power, their vastness, also made cohesion difficult. And there was plenty of infighting and factionalism. Then, losing several strikes for 8-hour workdays, coupled with the fallout from the famous Haymarket riots, where someone threw a bomb at a group of police officers, the Knights of Labor basically got knocked out of existence. In its place, the far more conservative American Federation of Labor, the AFL, flourished. It had a very different philosophy, only opening its ranks to white, skilled laborers. But in 1905, the International Workers of the World, i.e. the IWW, aka the Wobblies, arrived on the scene, aiming to bring all workers together in solidarity, which, according to Loomis, frightened employers, government, and the AFL, who all wanted to crush the organization. Their propaganda-savvy approach to promoting one big union for all oppressed workers brought hope to thousands for the first time. While many of its most outspoken members used violent rhetoric, Loomis notes that the Wobblies offered workers practical advice to avoid violence in workplace actions, and believed general strikes, i.e. strikes across all industries rather than worker violence, would trigger the revolution. Its famous Bread and Roses strike, in which workers demanded not only enough money for necessities like bread, but for luxuries like freshly cut flowers, saw the Wobblies shut down the center of the New England textile industry, Lawrence, Massachusetts. Mill owners and police responded violently, and armed militias descended on the town. After mothers and children aligned with the cause were beaten by officers, a congressional committee was called. Workers testified about their struggles, and the American Woolen Company eventually succumbed to public scrutiny, but the Lawrence Union dissolved in a mere 2 years. See, the Wobblies shared some problems with the Knights of Labor, and its disorganization, tendency to move from cause to cause across state lines with little consistent organizing, as well as its infighting and factionalization. But the fatal blow was the government and various militias' violent crackdown on the Wobblies, which included harassing, beating, arresting, and imprisoning workers on trumped-up charges, tarring and feathering, and straight-up murdering members. At one point, copper mining company Phelps Dodge assembled a private militia to stop a miners' strike. The militia kidnapped over 1,000 suspected radicals, forced them into cattle cars knee-deep in manure, and dropped them off in the middle of a desert, and what's now known as the Bisbee deportation. There's two things I hate. It's being covered in and the desert. I hate both of those things. Mix those together, it's just like the smoothie from hell. The violence that the Wobblies sustained eventually crushed the organization and their dreams of revolution. Now, later in 1919, the AFL resoundingly rejected a Wobbly-inspired proposition for one big union and a nationwide general strike. and made any unauthorized strike punishable by expulsion from the Federation. Since then, courts, corporate interest, and politicians have made the kind of union power the Wobblies imagined impossible, using tactics ranging from newspaper propaganda to private police forces to spying to intimidation to violence to the Taft-Hartley bill that defanged unions by outlawing important tactics like solidarity strikes. The 70s and 80s were the death blow for union vitality in America, as deindustrialization decimated factory jobs that were union strongholds. Reagan inaugurated a new era of union busting when he destroyed the Air Traffic Control Union, PATCO, by firing over 11,000 striking workers, and what Loomis says marked the beginning of the modern corporate war on organized labor. It gave private employers confidence they could treat their workers like Reagan had treated the air traffic controllers, and the government would not intervene. Wow. I didn't know that about Reagan, and that's horrible because the whole Wisecrack team just got matching Ronald Reagan tattoos. When miners in Arizona went on strike in 1983, the state and our old friends Phelps Dodge conspired to start an undercover private police force specifically to destroy the Union. These efforts culminated with 425 state troopers and 325 National Guard members with helicopters and military tanks chasing away the striking miners. The workers subsequently voted against unionization. Now, importantly, what little remained of the American labor movement was increasingly constrained by policy decisions that fragmented American unions along both sectoral and geographic lines, according to scholar Alexander Hertel Fernandez, who notes that fragmentation has weakened labor's capacity to shape national politics. We see the effects of fragmentation in Hollywood today, where, for example, animation writers are not represented by the WGA, but by a separate animation union. This lessens the power of the WGA to halt all production, despite the Animation Guild's support for the strike. Additionally, each Hollywood union negotiates new contracts at different times, lessening the likelihood of multiple unions striking at once. That's part of why this particular WGA strike is so important. Negotiations loom for the Directors Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, and the Teamsters, who represent drivers, casting directors, location managers, and other Hollywood workers, meaning there's a rare moment for real solidarity across the various Hollywood factions. And at the time of recording this video, members of SAG are currently voting on whether or not to strike. But we still haven't answered the question of why we should care so much about this particular strike, which, representing mostly college-educated writers based in major cities, differs from the popular conception of what the blue-collar union worker looks like. Well, let's take the 2007-2008 writers' strike for an example. At the time, writers faced an existential crisis, the arrival of new media platforms, and the subsequent gutting of writer compensation. After 100 days of agitation, writers were able to secure an admittedly lowballed residual model that the Directors Guild and the Screen Actors Guild later copied. And in the process, they created a new framework for how we should think about creative ownership in the digital age. Now, while the strike may have denied you some episodes of The Office, it improved conditions for workers across Hollywood. But another reason we should all care is that this strike carries implications that go far beyond Hollywood. Writers are confronting new threats to their work, threats that workers across so many industries face, like the perils of what happens when a real job becomes gig work, and the loss of worker protection that comes with that change. Or the way AI, that's been trained on human creativity and output, could be used to replace, or at the very least, grossly devalue workers across industries. Or the way wages are across the board failing to keep up with inflation and cost of living. Fun fact, I at least have not got an inflation or cost of living raise in about 18 months. So that's been fun. It's been good for me. I'm loving it, you know? This lack of raise is McDonald's because I'm loving it. And like McDonald's, it's also slowly killing me. Now, the rising tides of the Hollywood writers may not be able to lift all boats, but it can bring major existential issues surrounding contemporary labor to the forefront. And there are few jobs, at least in America, that aren't being affected by either gigification, AI technology, or stagnant wages, so the precedent set here could eventually affect all of us. The story of the American labor movement is speckled with tragedy, lost causes, and government and corporate repression. But it's also a fundamentally hopeful one. We've come a long way from working 18 hours in dirty factories, and that's because of the bravery and fortitude of millions of American workers. We're in a new era where, despite decades of repression, organized labor seems to be making a comeback across industries, and succeeding even against multinational behemoths like Starbucks and Amazon. We may never be able to realize the Wobblies' dream of one big union, but at the very least, we should support all workers fighting for dignified and sustainable labor conditions, no matter the color of their collar. Because the only people who benefit from us not showing solidarity with workers across industries are the ones trying to pay us less and less while we work more and more. But what do you guys think? Should those of us who have never been within 1,000 miles of a Hollywood set still be supporting the WGA strike? Do their concerns about fair pay and encroaching AI apply to all of us? Or do we really just want the fastest route to a new season of Young Sheldon? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much to all of our patrons for your support. It means a lot. If you're interested in getting videos early with no ads, along with extra audio and video content and access to our Discord server, check it out. There's a link in the description. I'd love to see you there. Also, thank you so much to just all of you for being here, for watching videos, for engaging in the conversation in the comments, for liking, subscribing, sharing, all of those things that fill up the algorithm's hungry belly, because it's got to eat. But in the meantime, why not support writers? And we'll see you later.